Tons of you guys have been asking, what is the point of this F40 project? Is it a road car? Is it a track car? What's it going to be when it's done? Why are we building it? And the answer has something to do with climbing mountains, but at the same time, absolutely nothing to do with climbing mountains. And I'm going to explain it entirely. You guys have been asking tons of questions about this project, and we're going to dive into all of the details. I'm going to answer everything that I can because this channel is just as much about the why as it is the how. We're talking shop today. And on top of that, I've got this. It's a lease. I'm going to tell you about it at the end of the episode. Let's dive in. I want to be clear right out of the gate, we are not working on the car today. I'm waiting on parts to show up, I'm waiting on steel so we can get started on the chassis, and I'm waiting on suspension pieces so that I can do that suspension episode I was telling you about. But in the interim, I want to talk about why we are building this car and what it's going to be when we are done. I think it defines this channel as a whole if you don't know the answer already. Like I said, it has something to do with climbing mountains, so bear with me on my analogy here. If you're asking me in the simplest terms, there are two types of mountain climbers. The first is there for the glory, or at least just for the view from the top. They're climbing Mount Everest because it is the tallest mountain, because they want to see the world from the highest point, or because they want to tell people they did it. It's a notch on their belt. And then there are just mountain climbers. People that climb the mountain because it's there, because it represents a challenge, and once they reach the summit, it's on to the next one because it's one of many to conquer. I think I fit into that second category. I don't care about the view from the top. I don't care about the end result in the way that you probably think I do. Yes, I care about where we're going and how it's going to turn out a lot. That's why I put in the effort that I do. But it isn't about the end result. It's about the challenge that it presents. And if you're here because you are eager for that end result, I get it, but you might be on the wrong channel. You should be here because we're about to climb a mountain. I'm going to be making choices throughout this entire project that make the climb the most exciting for me. I want this to be a challenge. I want to learn more. I want to push my skills. I want to push my talents, and I want to learn. And I want to build the craziest car that I can. And sometimes the decisions might not make sense for the end use. Yeah, I might sacrifice street ability because I'm not here to build something comfortable and cushy. I don't care to do that. I certainly could do it. That's not what I'm here to do. I'm here to build things that are interesting to me and to put together a mountain that represents the most fun challenge that I can. Now, let's talk about what the challenges are going to be. I think it's a very valid worry to wonder if a V12 can even fit inside of this car, given that it was originally a V8. But you might not have known there is one other V12 F40 already out there, and it's called the Simpson Ferrari V12 GTR. And it has the previous generation V12 in it from a 550 or 575. It's a pretty spectacular car. It was built a couple of decades ago, and it is a true bona fide race car. But what's important in our case is that it fits a V12 in a factory chassis. The car really hasn't been modified all that extensively, to be clear. In our case, we're building a custom tube chassis. We have no limits other than making sure it fits inside of this car. Now, obviously, we've got to make sure that our axle center line is still in place, and that gives us a front dimension where the engine has to fall within. But because there's no limits or boundaries inside of here that we have to work with in a traditional sense, we can move the steering wheel and the pedals wherever we need them to be. We can move me forward if we have to. I'm pretty confident we're not going to have any trouble fitting a V12 because it's already been done. A bunch of you were really upset in the last episode when I said I'm going to delete direct injection from this engine. Some of you think that's insane, that direct injection is part of what makes this engine so spectacular, but it's not. Direct injection is a system that's really used for efficiency and emissions, not power. Yes, there is some power benefit, but we're going to overcome that and more when we go to E85 and it can actually tune this thing. On top of that, having a system that can run direct injection effectively is monumentally expensive, tens of thousands of dollars. That's a cost that we don't need to spend when there's not a meaningful benefit to get it. We also would have to start from square one. Tuning direct injection is a huge headache. We also don't have charts for these injectors or these fuel pumps. We'd be starting from square one. We're not going to find this information on Google because nobody's really messing with these engines like that. So We're gonna go to port injection. Although that sounds like the complicated solution, I promise you it's way more simple. And I want that ITB sound. I'm gonna break some hearts with this one, but if you wanna argue about it in the comments, let's go, because I'm here for it. Gated manuals are the most overrated thing in the automotive world. Yes, they are romantic, they're beautiful, they sound cool, and they're indicative of a time, but all that they really indicate is that this old gearbox it's attached to is so sloppy that they had to put steel guides in place so you could find the gear. That's all a gated shifter is. It's from when gearboxes were so crappy that we needed some help to get them where they needed to go. I know that it's quintessentially Ferrari and it's iconic, but I'm not gonna put it on this project just because it was there originally. That is the antithesis of what this build is about. I want the best of the best. And that's why we're turning to Hollinger for this full sequential manual gearbox, and it sounds like some of you even misunderstood what this gearbox actually is. It's not automatic, it's not a PDK, and it's not a DCT or dual clutch transmission. It's a full manual sequential. Yes, it's missing a shift lever, but that doesn't mean it's not under our control. Much like my racing sim, it has paddles, but no, it's not controlled with the computer. These are air actuators that are going to be shifting the transmission on our control. I know that a lot of people think that this misses what a manual gearbox is supposed to be about, the engagement from the driver, but the engagement is controlling the power band, deciding when the gears are going to change, and having complete control over the driving experience, and that's what we're gonna have in the best possible form, both performance and reliability. There's not a lot of transmissions out there that we could bolt to the back of this very odd V12 and that would hold the 800 horsepower. That's why Hollinger is the perfect partner for this. Now for this one, I want to just set expectations about what this content's going to be. As I said in the beginning, this channel is just as much about the why as it is the how. And I think that also explains some of the quote-unquote justifications. Some commenters think that I spend a lot of time justifying my choices, and I don't really see it that way. I see it as explaining. I want to answer why I'm doing things, not just how. I want there to be reasoning, choices, logic in this entire project. And that's part of the reason that this content will be a lot of talking. It's not just welding, it's not just entertainment. It is about everything that goes into building a car of this caliber. And while we're at it, I want to manage those expectations. There is no way that this car will be done inside of 2 years. It's going to take a lot of time, and it could take even more. So I hope you guys are here for the long haul.
If you've been here for a while, you know that the 244 GTK represents my introduction to TIG welding. My first TIG welding project ever is still a part of that vehicle, and all of the progress we've made on the project in the last 4 years represents all of my progress as a TIG welder, and I have learned a lot in the time since. I'm at least somewhat competent at TIG welding, and I'm comfortable tackling any project put in front of me. Along with TIG welding, the 244 GTK brought about a number of other tools and skill sets that we've been able to utilize on that project and every other one since, namely 3D scanning and CAD work. We're able to take those 3D scans and those CAD drawings and then execute upon them in a number of different ways. We've got a 3D printer now, which allows us to produce small, light-duty parts and pieces, and we can rapid prototype parts that we want to make heavier duty or that we want to make out of different materials. I've said time and time again that Send Cut Send is one of the most valuable assets to all of the projects we've tackled here on this channel, and it's with 3D scanning and CAD design that we've been able to utilize this stuff to the fullest. But as we move forward, I want to take these same skill sets and utilize them in other new, meaningful ways. I want to start this out by giving a nod over to the guys at Otsuka Maxwell Design, or OMD. If you haven't come across their channel yet, you need to stop and go check it out, because they too are also doing some awesome Ferrari content, building a 412 with the same F140 GA that we are, and it's coming together incredibly well. But what's relevant to this segment right now is their use of CAD design to create custom billet machined parts. This is something that I've always dreamt of doing, but I don't have the skill set, the knowledge, or the tools to do it. I'm turning to these guys for inspiration and hopefully some collaboration in the future, But their work and their channel is a wonderful testament to what this type of talent and this type of tooling can provide to a project like this. It's my hope that as we make progress on the F40, I'll find partners that can help bring some ideas of mine to life in the 3D physical form. There's an unlimited number of ways we can utilize flat pack and 2D design from our friends at SendCutSend, but every once in a while there's a hurdle we can't cross, and I'd love to bring forth some designs in 3 dimensions out of billet aluminum. Beyond that, I'd also love to explore 3D metal printing. This is something that I could see us using as we design and create some custom headers and the exhaust for our F40. 3D printing has come a long way over the last decade, and while we've just introduced PLA and ABS to our repertoire, something like Inconel could really take this a huge step further. And while we're not going to acquire a 3D printing metal machine, it might be an opportunity to partner with someone who has one so that we can bring some ideas to life. I want to highlight my friend John Volk over at Couch Built because he's been utilizing a lot of metal 3D printed technology for his project, in which he's 13B swapping a BMW i8. You're going to want to check his channel out too. I'll link it in the description. But it's a wonderful example of how 3D printed metal can be incorporated into a build without absolutely breaking the bank. So hopefully we can turn to something like that in our project as well.
Now, a ton of you guys have been asking this one, and trust me, I get it. It's an F40. We all know that this project is expensive, but I gave an answer about this on Instagram earlier this week, and I want to touch upon that same answer one more time. I don't think that the financial side of this project is important. Attitude is, heart is, effort is. What we're doing here isn't building an expensive car, not at its core. What we're building is something special that we are excited about, something that we want to do badly enough to see it through until the end. And trust me when I say that's the hardest part of any project, period. And that's what I want this to be about. Building excitement in these episodes so you guys feel excited too to go out and tackle your own projects, to climb your own mountains. You don't have to be building Ferraris or anything expensive. That's never been what I'm about or what this channel has been about. And I don't want that to be the walk away or take away lesson from this project either. I don't want people here because they want to see how expensive of a car we can make, because that's not interesting nor valuable. I want to be focusing on giving everything that we can to build something we are passionate about. And in this case, yes, it is an expensive car, and I'm giving up everything that we can just to even get to this point here. It's cost a lot and then some, but I want to focus on the heart, the effort, the skills, and everything that we can learn from this project, and not the dollar figure. The interior. It's probably one of the most asked questions so far, at least in some form or another. Is it going to have air conditioning? Will it have cruise control or backup cameras? Am I going to make it more comfortable and plush than it ever was before? The answer to all of those is going to be no. It's important to understand what it is that we're building here, and importantly, what I want to build. I don't care to expend energy, time, and money on comfortable things. That's not of interest to me. The end use is, but we got to go back to that first answer. Building that isn't fun, and I'm here for the build. I don't really care to have a comfortable plush car when I'm done. That's for somebody else. In this case, it's important to understand that we are building a tube chassis car. And for that, I want to turn your attention to Rob Daum's 4-rotor RX-7. It's another really good example of a tube chassis build. Now, in a lot of this footage, his car isn't finished, but it goes to show you that the inside of it is built solely out of tubes. There's no floor in that car or trans tunnel or anything else. You can see all of it. And while we will be closing this car out and filling it in, making it finished, it's going to be a lot more race car than it will be a road car. That's just kind of how a tube chassis car will be, at least the one that I want to build. Some of you will be disappointed. You want this to be a street car. You want it to be an improvement over its predecessor, the original F40. But I'll remind you, the original F40 was about as Spartan as it gets. There was really no interior. It was a raw carbon floor and raw doors. It had cloth seats and a cloth dashboard, and that's about it. This will be that turned up to 11. Again, this is going to be the gnarliest version of an F40 there ever was or will be, I hope. and that includes the interior being just as gnarly as the rest of it. Sorry to disappoint some of you. No, but it's not going to be a street car either. I'm not worried about the label that it has or what its ultimate purpose is going to be. This is about the journey and about building something that I think is spectacular and something that I can enjoy in my own way. It's tough to say how much is going to be Ferrari parts, but I do have a number of other Ferrari parts that we're going to be using. Like I said, suspension episode coming soon. It's going to be sick. There are two problems with this question. One, stainless. I know that Mad Mike's 787D has a stainless steel chassis on it, but for any fabricators out there that look at video of this thing, you'll notice it's not really built in such a way that would pass any motorsport regulation, and on top of that, stainless just is not a good choice of material for a chassis. It's very brittle, it will break. And that's not to take away from Mike or his car. He's a buddy and that car is sick, but for what we're trying to do here, there's a reason nobody builds chassis out of stainless steel. It's just a bad idea. Number two, titanium. Nobody's done that either, and that's because of the cost. I priced it out for this episode, and we're talking about $250,000 in material alone. And that's on top of the fact that it would be very hard to weld it all together because you would need to get rid of all oxygen both outside and inside of the tubes for it to work properly, and that's not really possible unless you want to weld the entire car inside of an oxygen-free chamber with a scuba suit on, and we're not going to do that. We also just couldn't afford it. It'd be cool, maybe some million out there will do it someday, but not us. As most of you probably know already, every single F40 left the Ferrari factory in Rosso Corsa red. And so that means when they are not red, they start grabbing a lot of attention. And sometimes those cars look absolutely incredible. I mean, mind-blowingly good. Sometimes not so much. If you're asking me, a lot of the times F40s change their color solely as a way to get attention and separate themselves from their contemporaries, and that's not really my style. What I don't want is for the color on this project to be what gives it value or makes it stand out. I don't want it to be what makes it interesting, and I certainly don't want people to refer to it as X-colored F40. When it's coming down the road, you're going to know it's an F40. And once it gets up close to you or once you hear it, you're going to know that something else different and crazy is going on here, but it's not going to be the color. I will not be using paint as a crutch to make this car stand out. It's going to be Rosso Corsa red.
Some of you will hate me for saying this, but honestly, I think the F40 with its pop-up headlights up looks silly. The car was designed with them down, and the purpose of pop-up headlights is to be down at all times other than when necessary. Headlight height regulations necessitates the pop-up feature, but if it were possible, Ferrari would have designed this car without pop-up headlights, and we can see a version of that on the LM. They had enclosed headlight housings that, in my opinion, look a lot better, although it is a slightly updated look, and I know that it's not for everyone. In a perfect world, I'd have an authentic LM nose, but that costs an insane amount of money, so I have settled for an authentic road car front end. Eventually, I would like to swap to an LM aftermarket unit as most F40s have installed, but for now, I'm going to work with what I've got, and I'm going to work to make it my own. I'm going to eliminate the pop-ups like we did on the 244 GTK, and strive for something that looks completely its own without going too far overboard and having it look silly.
Now this, on the other hand, is a financial question that I'm happy to answer because I think everybody wants to know, how does any of this actually work? Here at StanceWorks, we do not have other jobs and we don't have money coming from anywhere else. We have 4 main revenue streams. The first one are YouTube ads. When you're watching these episodes and it makes you watch one, sometimes you can skip it. Some of you will even get one right here. we get paid a fraction of a penny every time one of you sees them, and when you get enough views, it starts to add up. It's usually not even enough to pay the rent on the shop by itself, to be clear, but sometimes you have a good month. Past that, we've got ad integrations. When I stop and say, this episode is brought to you by this brand, and then we give you an ad here in the shop, well, we get paid for that, and that's how we have funds to buy parts for these cars. But most importantly, we have our sponsors, companies like H&R and Send Cut Send. These guys are how this entire thing is even possible. Without them, none of this would work. They provide us with parts, but they also help fund this entire thing. It's an endorsement of their brand for ours and vice versa, and we are eternally grateful for their support and everybody else that helps along the way. Last but not least, we have our merchandise, and that's a way for you guys to support us directly, and we take every single penny that we make, bottom to top, and circulate it right back into these projects. Auntie and I, we don't take home a big paycheck. We slum it so that we have as much money as possible for projects like these so that we can make episodes and keep this whole thing working. It is a very fine line between F40 project and going broke. Now, last but not least, some of you guys want to know, how do we even get here? And it's important to note that there's no such thing as overnight success. This YouTube channel is only a couple of years old, but StanceWorks isn't. I started StanceWorks as a blog and forum almost 16 years ago, January in 2009. And ever since then, it's been a project in building a brand and building an identity and building a following, building sponsors and relationships so that we can be here doing exactly this. Now, some of you guys are fairly worried that this project means I'm abandoning this one, and that is not the case, I promise you. As you can probably tell, I've been hard at work on this thing too. We are going to be back out on track very soon. In all honesty, the plans for the 244 GTK in 2025 are probably bigger than any year prior. I've got some really cool stuff in the works. We are planning to go racing in this thing. I'm making some changes to the car. Everything's torn apart once again, but I promise you guys, this project is far from over. It's only gonna get better. It's just gonna require some work. And while the focus of the content is gonna be on the F40, we're still gonna be seeing lots of the 244 GTK, especially on track. You have my word. Last but not least, we have a new lease. You guys have been asking about what's going on with this shop, what we're doing for a new shop, if we found somewhere. And honestly, I am shocked to have this answer, but the landlord came around and we get to stay, at least for 3 more years. This is at a very serious price increase though, almost 40% in rent. It's at the very top of our budget. It's all we can afford, but we figure we're probably gonna spend about the same amount to move somewhere else, especially once we factor in the cost of actually moving and the double rent we'd have to pay and the new security deposit and all that kind of stuff. It just makes sense to stay. We've been here for 12 years, let's make it 15. We are excited for this, and it just means the episodes are gonna keep coming as always. But I do want to address one final thing, and that's that this is not an invitation for everybody to come to the shop. I love that you guys want to see it and that you support us, and we will host open houses on occasion, but we've had people coming by literally every day, and it interrupts filming, it interrupts our workflow, it makes it hard to get these episodes done, and we're trying to put these episodes together so you have something to watch. So if you want to come to the shop, I beg you, please just wait till we have an event and we invite everybody out, and we'd love to see you then, because your support means the world to us. We just have to be able to focus on working, because if we stop for everybody that shows up, we can't get anything done. That's all I've got for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back next week with some actual work getting done on the car, and I'll see you then.